To be completely brazen about it, if we're just going to talk about Xbox stuff, I don't think they've had a full-on people asking me whether they should buy a Xbox game since I don't even know when. Like, not the Xbox One generation.
No.
It's before then. Where you have to go back more than 10 years.
Nah, I
like,
agree.
I've always had the consoles. I've bought the Xbox One. I've been with them since the beginning of the original Xbox. But there is nothing in the last 10 plus years that compared with when Gears of War was dropping, or when the first Fable was dropping. Or like Halo's run, like that's what we're talking about. This is back up there,
absolutely.
And they've bought their way there.
Yeah,
they've just gone like, just give it to us. Like, this is an Xbox thing now. But it is up there.
Hey, they always did that, even back in the days of Epic and Gears. That wasn't their thing necessarily.
You're doing that thing for Halo for the Mac, or it's an Xbox game now.
That's just now good at sometimes identifying like what works and what doesn't. But what I was going to say was, like, yes, Xbox needed this, but I also think Bethesda needed this. Like, obviously, I've been with them all the way through the company. I didn't doubt that this was going to be good because I really enjoyed Fallout 4. But after the disaster of 76, I think there were a lot of people rightly saying, and, the sort of midness that some people thought of Fallout 4. I think a lot of people were like, well, we've got great RPGs now. We've got CD Projekt Red, who have just come up and defined themselves. And I'm talking pre-Cyberpunk here, by the way. Like, in the glow of The Witcher 3, which came out the same year as Fallout 4 and sort of just stole its thunder, didn't it? I think people were saying, well, we've kind of moved on from Bethesda games. Like, we don't agree with this clunk. We won't put up with these bugs at all. I feel like Starfield, they needed it. If it was another mess, I think it would have taken them maybe 10 years to recover with an Elder Scrolls 6 or whatever. But thankfully, I know there's been some backlash to the game. There's been more tepid reviews than maybe they were expecting. But playing it, it feels like a Bethesda game. And it's just like, it reminds you why you had such confidence in the first place. And it reminds you why you fell in love with Skyrim to begin with back then. In the same way that it kind of gives you more confidence in Xbox and their approach, because it's like, finally, you have a game that's in the conversation, that's vying for a Game of the Year contendership, and is a reason why people want to buy Xboxes.
I tell you what, as well, like, speaking of the Game of the Year stuff, it's so easy when you're playing through a new game that is hitting you with all the new ideas, the new mechanics, the sheen, the level of production, whatever, to be like, oh my God, it's Game of the Year. It's like, it's an easy thing to default to, and we reconsider it later in the year or whatever. This has to be, and I guess we'll see how it feels across the rest of the game, the most impressive game that I've played this year. Tears of the Kingdom is the other one, I think, in terms of just the sheer, the game's matrix, the amount of different points that are all talking to each other in terms of the physics objects, how they stitch together, the different things that you can make, and the way that you then use them in the mission design, and it all talks to each other and it works, and there's a harmony there. Starfield is less harmonious sometimes in terms of the glitches, the bugs, whatever it is. But it's just the scale of it. And it's one of those things where I was like, oh, okay, no one makes games like this anymore because they're really hard. And we've got two of them, but they're both set over about 8-year dev times. Larian took forever. There was an early access version of Baldur's Gate 3. And then Starfield, we found the old post that What Culture had in 2017 of when we first started covering it, when it was leaked on 4chan. But still, that's 6 years ago, and it was in progress back then anyway. These games are extremely hard to do, and the fact that you've pulled one off does reinforce the fact that when I'm playing through Starfield, I'm like, this actually could be Game of the Year, because they're largely nailing a bar that no one is even attempting anymore. Like, and there was one of the things, it's a weird feeling that I had when we were covering this, or the industry across the year, where it was like, oh my God, it's this incredible year for gaming. And I'm like, yeah, it is. The variety is great. We've got everything from Street Fighter 6 to Dead Space, and little small games like Humanity and Viewfinder. But nothing, Viewfinder more so in terms of blowing me away, nothing at a certain budgetary level was doing anything new. And it was like, you're refining formula. Dead Space is great, but I know what it is. And like, this is one of those things where it's blowing me away in like a completely mechanical gameplay first, player driven, you trust me to play this way. And like, that's really special. And it's like, I almost given up that the industry could even do this anymore.
It's such a weird one, right? Because I think you could look at Starfield and kind of judge it is less than like the sum of its parts almost. You can look at the cutter, you can look at the mining and say, that's from No Man's Sky. You can look at the space travel and say, that's not as good as No Man's Sky. You can look at this and just say, it's Skyrim with a skin. You can look at the invisible walls, which people are really obsessed with, by the way, that I've not bumped into yet, by the way, and be like, well, it's limiting. It's not as big as it seems. And I honestly think, like, not to, just slag off anyone else's opinion, but I almost wonder if you're missing the forest for the trees almost. And I get it. There's a lot of trees that you might smash into on the way, but that forest is beautiful. And fortunately, I feel lucky that I'm able to kind of see it in totality and be blown away by it.
There's something worth saying there about when it was like when in the run up to No Man's Sky, there was so much mystery on how have they done this.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the most hypeable things about it. How have they built a galaxy? And obviously not Sean Layden.
No, it is Sean Murray.
Sean Murray was out there saying, like, look, we procedurally generated this entire universe and like, so many different planets, 60, 70,000 planets, etc. And the fact that we didn't know how they'd done it and other game devs didn't know how they'd done it, that was one of the coolest things about it. There's something about when you finally present it to the public where they need to prove it. And I totally get it. I get it's like a scientifically minded thing. Like you want to see the seams. Like it's that thing where you look at a game and when does the rendered, like you said, a forest, when does the rendered forest become the skybox?
Yeah.
When it becomes the back texture. And it's like, okay, that's how they did it. Okay, cool. I can keep going now. And it's like, and Starfield's having its moment with that because people have realized that the game's planets are made up of tiles, and each tile is about the size of Skyrim, and they all stitch together, and you can see where they stitch. And I was like, I didn't need to know that. I appreciate it. I at some point, you're just telling me that Bethesda are still human. Like that's fine. I can still be in awe of the whole thing. But it is interesting because it's like people need to chase that because it's so impressive.
Absolutely, and you know what? I think it is, a thing that Bethesda games have already been lumped with. And I understand why people don't like past Bethesda games. I can understand why they get caught up in all of these issues and are just like, nah, that's ruining my experience. Because, I could say that I think Skyrim is a magical game, but I can point at it and go, those bugs suck. The combat isn't for me. It's way too floaty. Like
that man's not got a gun.
That man's not got a gun. The way the dialogue is handled is not great. You know what I mean? Like there's all of these things you can point to, but again, I don't think it's making excuses for Skyrim because yes, it has its issues, but what it's going for and what it achieves on that grander scale has always been so impressive and so kind of pushing the medium forward, like you mentioned, and it offers something that no one else is doing or people might try to grasp and can't quite achieve that. I think that's where I kind of come down in it. Like, yes, of course it has problems, but who else is doing this? Who else is delivering a kind of experience like this kind of right now?
And it's like, I like almost get as specific about it as a specific feeling that the best games give you where you're completely lost in them and you're not thinking about the technical side of it. It's part of why I hate all the worrying about the different sliders and the graphics options. I just want to play the thing. I want to get lost in it. I want to have that feeling where I'm completely immersed in it. I want that symbiotic connection with whatever's on screen.
Yeah.
And it is getting lost in that. And there is something about it's like the magical feeling of it or whatever, where you're completely lost in a world and you're not thinking about, oh, well, that's where that tile ends. That's where the biome stops. Okay, I heard it click the next music track in because I walked over this boundary or whatever, and just living that life in that game. And like I said, so many games, especially in 2023, they're phenomenal, but we know what they are. We know quote unquote how they've been made. And I don't mean that you know how to code. I just mean you can see the parts, the character models, they're fighting each other. It's Street Fighter. Like it's just one of those things where the amount of inner workings happening in Starfield.
Yeah.
Like that's what I can't even comprehend. How did that character keep track of that thing and then know where to go? How does this universe actually make sense? That's the really incredible stuff.
I get it, man. I totally do. I think to a certain extent, all video games are kind of performing a magic trick, right? And,
the best ones are.
Whether they kind of pull that off and manage to convince you of the illusion will vary person to person. And Bethesda certainly drop a lot of cards when they're trying to perform this magic trick, but they managed to pull it off in a way for me where I'm like, fine, it still works even if you might have dropped that ace of spades on the floor. I still believe in it. I still buy into it. I'm still fully on board with what you have to offer. That, like you said, when you kind of hit those hiccups that kind of maybe offer a roadblock to the barrier, it's like, no, because I still don't know how you did this. I still don't know how you've accomplished that. You're still providing me with enough magic within this experience that it kind of offsets the other stuff. Again, it sounds like I'm making a lot of excuses.
No, that's entirely what it is, yeah.